And we are live. Welcome back, Jimmy and Brian, with you guys. Day two, getting ready. First and foremost, happy Mother's Day to everybody. And thank you for spending some of your Mother's Day with us for Sinister CyberCon Day two. We've got a fun day two today, Brian, for everybody. Lots of cool content going on, both some very cool guests and some cool artist demonstrations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, day one, we had a hell of a time. Lots of great guests there. Interaction from you, the fans, has been wonderful. We appreciate that. Day two, we have a stacked, let me say it one more time, stacked group of individuals and artists that are going to be gracing the screen during this time of shelter in place. So we hope that you enjoy it. Please bring your comments, your questions. Keep it fun and light for everybody as well. And remember that just because we're not face to face doesn't mean that we're not all in this together. And also be kind. Be kind to each other. Be kind in the chat room. Be kind to individuals. We don't know what everyone's going through. So just enjoy yourself. And to all your mothers out there, thank you so much, because it wasn't for mothers, we wouldn't be able to sit here right now, because who would put us here on earth, right? So thank you so much, Jimmy. I'm stoked for this first guest, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little jelly that you're gonna be talking to him, but I gotta talk to him for a little bit, so I got my fix, so that's cool. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Jimmy. Do your thing, brother, and I'll see you guys around 1 o'clock later.
All right, so there you go. Thank you guys. Welcome to day two, and our first guest kicking things off. I think everybody knows this man's work, who is a fan of Sinister Creature Con, now Sinister CyberCon. It is an anthem of work that, as any 80s horror fan goes, you listen to this thing about 10 dozen times throughout the year. But Killer Klowns from Outer Space composer John Massari is our first guest on day two. John, how you doing, man?
I'm doing very good on this Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there.
So, man, like I said, when I introduced you, the Killer Klowns from Outer Space soundtrack, you got like bits and pieces from like all different kinds of music that come together to create these themes. You got everything from like the dun 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 to the like almost imperial, the Killer Clown march, that dun. Like, how much fun was it to sit down and get to create the score to this thing, man?
Oh my goodness, I was like, it was like a dream come true, because you got to understand, my love for film music started when I was a little kid. I went to my first triple feature. It was The Time Machine, Mysterious Island, and Journey to the Center of the Earth. And I didn't realize till a little bit after that it was the music that was left such a great impression on me. And when I got the opportunity to audition for this movie, and I was at the screening at Warner Brothers Studio, seeing the movie without any music, with practically no sound effects and just dialogue, it was so creepy and so bizarre, and it was like, it was a dream come true. It was, I'm not kidding you. And previous to that, I had seen a movie by Danny Elfman's brother, Richard Elfman. It was called The Forbidden Zone. And when I saw that movie at a festival, I thought to myself, I need to see this movie again, because I don't really understand it, but I like it. Whatever I experienced was so interesting and bizarre. And that's what I felt about Killer Klowns from Outer Space. And so the approach that I took was like a serious approach. Like if I was scoring, instead of making it goofy, I don't think it would have. The music is the straight man, basically. So if I had a goofy score that was like silly and not really didn't take it serious, I don't think it would have played well. And the Killer Brothers were very adamant. They told me all the films that they really loved at that time. Through when they were growing up, all the classic big event films that were of the day that had great legitimate scores. And they didn't tell us to do a legitimate score when they when we auditioned. Everyone said, "Here's the no direction whatsoever." Everyone said, "Just pick a scene, and you audition with that." And so the scene that I picked is when when Mike and Debbie first come to the tent, the circus tent, and they get chased around inside the spaceship, and then they run out, and the clowns converge on. That's where the Killer Clown March comes, and I figured that's a keystone moment. That whole musically and story-wise, it basically sets up the movie very well for the rest of the movie. So that's the scene that I picked. It was very challenging. It took about a week to do, and it was every aspect of working on this film was absolutely fun. I would jump out of bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then go to sleep at around 11:30 midnight, and that went on for 6 months. Excuse me, 6 weeks. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, there's a question from one of our viewers. Dawson Beavers wants to know, how did you compose the Clown March? So that song in particular, what was kind of like your inspiration for the Killer Clown March when you sat down for that one?
Well, that's thank you for that question very much. That is a near and dear piece to me, because that piece of music was actually written many years before, when I was in high school. And I was in a band, and we played Kiss, Blue Oyster Cult, Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, and we decided we were going to start doing our own music. So I came up with that Killer Clown March way back then, although it wasn't called anything. And my band thought it sounded too jazzy. We can't play jazz. We're playing hard rock. It's kind of jazzy. I go, well, But anyways, so that didn't work out. So when I saw the movie, I said, that music now has a home. So it's a good example for people who create things. Just because you create something, people don't understand it, that doesn't mean you ignore it and put it away. Well, you keep it to the side, but there's going to be a place for whatever you create at some point. And when you consider how lucky we are today that you're able to perform your music and put it on venues like YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, CD Baby, there's no excuse for not doing your music. Yeah. And think of this. There was a time, there's a composer I'm studying, I'm reacquainting myself with, that's Anton Bruckner. There were symphonies of his that he had never heard in his lifetime. As a matter of fact, his 6th symphony, he had never really heard it performed in its entirety. An orchestra ran through just a few movements of it, and that's all he had. There was no recording equipment back then, and that symphony wasn't played in its entirety till after his death. But what did he do? He didn't stop writing a symphony. He wrote another 3 symphonies. So what I would say to people that are creating, give you encouragement to keep your work. That maybe people won't understand it. That's okay. Keep creating, and maybe that piece that people didn't understand will be understood at some time in the future.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that the key really is to not stop once you kind of start. Like once the ball begins rolling, don't try to get too sidelined.
Right. And persistence is, if you do it every day, even if it's a little bit, right, it all adds up.
Yeah. So which one, man, when you sat down, everybody has a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Which one, which clown kind of caught your heart first?
Well, first of all, they all terrify me. It wasn't until everything, you started to hear more dialogue replacement and you started to hear more sound effects that the movie kind of comes to life, Right. Movie is in stages. We had no names for any of the clowns, really, except for Clownzilla, maybe Shorty. Had a name, but we didn't. The clowns came to life really because of the fans. The fans brought the clowns to life. They've given them names. They've given them, made them real, basically. But my favorite, I have 2 actually. One is Shorty, and there's a specific reason why Shorty is very significant. And then Rudy, because Rudy is like, I think he's bright, he's resourceful, he's like the cutest of the clowns. Of he's the almost like the least, he's the tall, goofy, friendly guy.
Right.
So, but then Shorty is kind of like a representation of a disenfranchised person, someone that feels left out, someone that is kind of looked down upon. And Shorty could be a child, a baby killer clown, could even be a girl or a boy. We don't know.
Right.
But that's not important. The point is that it's assumed because someone's short and someone's little and sweet and has a funny little bike, they can be picked on. And then, the Shorty, demonstrates that he can't be pushed into a corner, and he will fight back once confronted to a point where it's intolerable. So, anyways, that's a very deep analysis of it. But still, those are my two favorites.
The thing with Shorty too is, I mean, they all have their personalities. Like,
right.
They all have their distinct meanors, from everything from the big guy in the play yard in the fast food playground when he does his little wave, to Shorty when he stands up to the bikers, the infamous "you gotta knock my block off" scene. They all have that undertone, that sound that gives them the personality. Did you have anything to do with the sound of each little guy's like kind of undertone at all?
No, that would be Chuck Sereno did all the sound design, and I think he helped create the clown voices along with the Kyoto brothers. And that was really cool, because if you, like I have, listened to some of the dialogue tracks separately without any sound effects or music over them, the clown language is really something worth pursuing. As for like there's Klingon, and I don't know what you would call the clown language, because the world that they come from is probably basically unpronounceable, and their language is equally so. But it's really charming in that way that that Chuck was very innovative with his sound effects. And I must confess that even the highest end Blu-ray restoration does not have all the sound effects properly blended in that Chuck created, because our original mix, our original master, there were tracks that were just left out because of time. There was no time to balance them out properly, so they kind of had to cherry pick what they were going to use. So whatever master that finally mix master that's after that, that's what's been restored. But boy, it'd be wonderful one day to go back into the full tracks and bring them back to life, and who knows, maybe accentuate them in some way. There was someone that may I point out a question? Someone asked me about a particular track on my new album. Someone named Dawson Beavers. Yes. How did you compose "Tell Me What Is Real"? "Tell Me What Is Real" is the last cut on both soundtracks, the original soundtrack and the reimagined. And basically I wrote it with a friend of mine, Larry Getz, and he said, "What do you want the lyrics to be about?" And so I told him the story about my grandmother. I said, "I want it to be about my grandmother." And they go, and so I told the story about my grandmother when she came here to the United States, and basically she worked in a factory, and and how someone who's young doesn't yet speak the language, how they get betrayed and lied to, and she was in a factory as a child, working in a garment factory for 12 hours a day, and like she would just and she's very rugged. Both my grandparents were very rugged people, and they talked about it, but they didn't it wasn't like that was their pride that, oh, I got taken advantage of. She was like, listen, I got taken advantage of, and here's what you do not to be taken advantage of.
Right.
So in other words, it's not like, woe is me. It's like, boy, I got through that. So that's the story behind the lyrics of Tell Me What Is Real. And I think you're one of the first people I've revealed that to.
He also, Dawson, he has a question that I can tell you. Everybody on our side of things will say yes, absolutely. Does this film make you scared of cotton candy?
No.
No?
It doesn't make me scared of cotton candy. No.
Not even in the Halloween Horror Night sense. We follow you on Instagram. You go to the maze, so you went through it. You smelled it. You walked through it. Not even after that.
Well, I mean, someone that is in a cotton candy cocoon, that would be scary. But it's not going to, for the once every 2 years when I eat some cotton candy, it's not going to discourage me.
Yeah. So what is it about, man, with music, in your opinion? Because coming from trying to put film together and edit, music adds so much with so little to, especially a scary movie. Having just done my last student film and having to go through, submit like your rough cuts and then your fine cut and then your musical edit. It's crazy how like a joke becomes funnier to me. It's crazy how like a dark hallway becomes scarier. It really is a trip. What is it in your mind from the musical sense? Is it with composing and underlaying the music that kind of creates the package?
Well, understand, maybe there are some new filmmakers out there that are watching this also, that the whole process of making a film is collaborative and evolutionary. In other words, things are going to evolve. You may have envisioned things a very particular way, but then all of a sudden, as you start working on it, you start making adjustments and little twists and turns that gets you to your final destination. But you have to embrace that, I would say. And as far as music, it's the same thing. Once you start out with a basic concept. I mean, the way I like to direct musicians that perform for me, just like I like to be directed by a good director, is that they give me like an emotional bearing of where they're going. I've worked with directors that over-explain things, and then you start getting lost. Or they do worse, which, in my opinion, where they over temp track music into their films because they want to make their cuts work. And sometimes it's necessary because they're trying to get a distribution deal and they want to make the film appear as, set the pacing enough where a distributor will pick it up. And then they get married to that temp track. And what's really sad is that some films that people just absolutely love had no temp track. When there was Killer Klowns did not have a temp track at all, except for the Dickies opening theme song. Didn't have any music within the whole score, within the whole movie. And there are other movies that are very innovative that were the editorial process was to story pacing, getting the story paced out properly, not having to worry about beats and stuff like that. So I did a Western for like a year ago for Josh Becker. He's a director and producer. He works with Sam Raimi a lot. And he didn't temp track. He says, by the way, we don't use temp tracks. This is the type of film that I want, And he explained it to me. And that's all he needed to do. And I just commenced from there.
Do you prefer then if they don't?
Well, if they do, it has to be a specific reason why they're using something. And it's just, for me, it was just to give a flavor. Because if you start copying things, what we start to have is like a homogenization of film music. So like, let's say for instance, a movie that I really love, Arrival with Johannes Johansson, Johan Johansson. And let's say they temp track that with the score from Alien, right? Okay, you would look at the movie and say, oh, wow, the music sounds like it's from Alien, instead of like, wow, this music seems like from another dimension. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's a good example.
Yeah.
How would have the movie Arrival, if you're familiar with that film, how would it have looked if they temp tracked the whole thing with Alien? So I think it's important that the music give a film a very unique signature.
Yeah. I think that it's almost, it encourages your like real creativity to be able to, for them not to as well. You know, the movies of old that kind of like hold true to, you know, collectors or film enthusiasts, that, you know, they'll go back to and they'll point to the score of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's all you guys just getting to sit down and write music versus a temp track. That's you guys, the true collaboration, I guess, so to speak.
I will fully admit that I use music as models. I'll hear a piece of music that I like. Maybe I like not necessarily the notes, but the form of what it does. Like, oh wow, this music is tooling along at this pace, and then bam, there's a complete different texture put in there that completely changes everything. So that concept will work its way into whatever I'm creating. You know what I'm saying? Right. It's not like, oh, let me see, what chord did they use? I'll use similar chords and I'll come in with a similar chord. No, it's basically the form and structure. So that's always helpful. You know, to have maybe a model, something to give you that would fall under influence. So
we had a kind of a cool question. When creating music, did you know what kind of tone you wanted to set right from the get-go? As far as scary or comedic points, did you always, like, when you sit down to write a piece, do you always know this is going to be dark or this is going to be more lighthearted, or does it kind of develop into something else along the way?
Well, since we're talking about Killer Klowns, I will say that the music is like a straight man, so to speak. So let's pick a scene where, I just know that it's in the seventh reel. It's like toward the end of the movie, you know, as we're winding up the movie to the final climax, where the clowns are marching through the streets, vacuuming people up. I knew immediately that I wanted to do something serious, and my motivation was, let's say, okay, let's substitute the town with a village in World War II, and let's substitute the Killer Klowns with a Panzer division, just bowling through the streets, and everyone just sitting around looking hopeless. You know, so you have this like kind of hideous military march going on, and it plays well. And I'm sure I've since recorded it with an orchestra. And you could probably play that music up against something else with a similar style, some kind of invasion thing, and it might work just as well.
Right.
So it has a universal kind of appeal. Gotcha. So things like that. So my approach was, the clowns. You could, I think you could, with a silly music score, I think you could potentially make the movie less effective. I mean, we can go back to examples like we all know now, because there's documentaries of it, the very first Star Wars in its original director's cut had lots of problems, and people came in with suggestions on how to cut the film, how to trim the story, how to rejuxtapose scenes, how to do some cheats like with off-camera lines and what have you, and also with music. Can you imagine if it was just in its original form, what it would be like? Would it have been just a fun little movie that was a one-time thing, and maybe they did one continuation of the story? What they did is they really locked down the form of that film. And that's where you go back to the collaborative process. You know, if George Lucas says, no, it's going to stay exactly the way every frame's got to be exactly the way, it may not have worked. I mean, because he had some heavy hitters. He had Steven Spielberg, Brian De Palma, Martin Scorsese telling him what's not working with his film.
Right.
And he was very, you know, and that's what I like. I have friends that I will send stuff to. There are other composers, and they're giving me critique, not for the specific reason, because they want me to look good. They want it to be whatever it is. They go, I see what you're trying to do. I think you should cut out this one part. This part, this music that's at the end, that could be your introduction. And I go, well, I never thought of that. That's a good idea, you know. So, and this has happened through history. The composers have, throughout history, have played their music to other composers. Contrary to popular belief, Salieri and Mozart were actually very well acquainted with each other and very much appreciated each other's work, not as it was portrayed in the movie. Salieri was actually a very, very sought after composer for other composers to study from. One of his students were Franz Liszt and Beethoven, for crying out loud. And both Mozart and Salieri went to each other's performances and had comments. So, you know, the whole thing of locking yourself in a room and not talking to people and coming up with your masterwork is a start, but you got to be able to take criticism. And one more thing about the film music, I think we take it for granted. Because when we watch a movie, let's say a dramatic, a narrative drama, and we hear music, we take it for granted that it's there. But we need it. It's that one element that kind of reaches out and helps to interpret the story in emotional terms through music.
Right.
I mean, basically, because in reality, you know, when you're walking down the street, you're not hearing music. It's kind of, when you think about it, it's kind of unnatural. And there was a time in early films where movie producers, this is like in silent film, or when sound started to come in, they said, listen, the only reason why you should have music is if we see a musician on stage, on the camera. Otherwise, it's silly to have music playing. And then they realized, no, we need that. I mean, that's, you know, it worked with opera. It works with drama on stage dramas. It's going to work with film. And thankfully, we have film music to help us relive the experience of whatever movie we love through music afterwards.
Andrew asked, were you a fan of the Klowns before you started work on the movie, or did you get to see them before you started work? And are you still, I think the answer to this is obviously yes, a fan of them now? I know you always seem like you have some of the coolest Killer Clown stuff. Like you get like the concert when you guys were doing the Killer Clowns in concert, to have the guys in the full costumes,
right?
Or because I know you guys were doing your thing before they came to Halloween Horror Nights,
right.
To see someone in those costumes made me super jealous. I wanted that picture.
Right. Well, you have to understand the Kyoto brothers were very involved in the exhibition of the live to film concert. So we also had Grant Kramer and Suzanne Snyder there, and Steve directed they kind of did a reenactment of the scene where they first come to the they come see they're in the spaceship and they see the first cotton candy cocoon. So Steve choreographed all of that, and that was really cool. We had some music playing in the background. This is before the concert started, and all the costume guys are from the Kyoto Brothers people. I mean, basically I told them, is there any way we can get someone in a clown suit? Oh gosh, let me put the call out. So I think there are 5 official Kyoto Brothers get-ups with the masks and the uniform, the whole thing. The guy that plays Killer, it's Andrew McGregor, and he's like 6'7", giant guy. He plays in Highland Games and stuff like that. He's also an entrepreneur and does a lot of appearances around the world. And he's a great guy to have around. So he was like the big tall guy. He's actually that tall. He wasn't on stilts or anything. So so the Kyoto brothers were there. There's also Buster Balloon Cadwell was there. There were various circus performers that did not perform, but they came dressed as
the clowns,
clown themed circus garb to kind of add to the atmosphere. But yeah, that's all from the Kyoto brothers. They have that. Yeah,
that's cool. Ashley is asking, what was the most difficult song to compose for the movie? Like, is there a song that you have a love-hate relationship with?
Well, that's a very good question, Ashley. I work through that. In other words, if there's a piece of music I don't like, now, have there been pieces of music that for a time I go, listen, this is the best I could do. I know if I had like 2 more days, this would be perfect. And it's in some movie. Thankfully, it's not in a movie that I see all the time or I have to be reminded of it. Right. But for Killer Klowns, the only thing that I would say was a challenge was the very end scene where, Dave takes his badge off and he blows up and he right. pops the nose of Clownzilla in an explosion. That whole sequence for the last, I'd say 2 minutes of that sequence was really tough. And the reason why it was tough, because something was distracting me. One of the Kyoto brothers had just gotten married, about to get married. He was having a big party that I got invited to. And I had to show up at 7:00 to be on a bus, to go to the different venues. They were going to go bar hopping and then come back to the studio and have a big old party, right?
Yeah.
And at around 5:00, 6:00, I should be getting ready to leave. This isn't looking good. And I had a recording session the next day. So I had to have it ready, right? Yeah. And so I just said, I'll go when I'm ready. I'll just meet him back at the studio. So I had to sacrifice going to the party, which is really good because I got to put in that extra 7 hours to make it just right. Everything timed out perfectly. Everything built up just right. Because I know that if I let it go and get recorded, I'd be editing to this day. I'd be trying to recreate it and edit it. So it's always good to approach something with 100% commitment. That way, years later, when you hear it, it just plays to you as a piece of music, not as a regret. And you can enjoy it instead of be haunted by it. So that's a good answer for you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Charles asks, you've composed for such a wide variety of scores, from themes to American Pickers to 24 to your recent work on a virtual reality film about Jesus. Mm-hmm. What is your creative process like for such different projects?
Well, each project is its own world. So you kind of basically get immersed into that world that you're going to be involved with. I mean, because any film has a backstory, Jimmy. People just don't, when a movie comes, well, nowadays, not just in theaters, but shows up on Netflix, you're looking at like 3 to 4, maybe 5 years prior to when it aired, the preparation,
right.
The preparation that goes into it, and finally it's ready. It's not like an episodic television where they have everything set up. They have the story and the characters. It's just a matter of shooting it, editing it, putting it in the machine, getting it out.
Right.
So each one of those films, you become close to the creators. You get acquainted with the people who are creating it, get as much input from them, and get what I call, you get religion. You get into the spirit of whatever you're working on. Right. Let me just say for American Pickers, that's a different process. That's there's a large body of music that I've created that's licensed, that appears everywhere. I mean, It might show up in American Pickers. It might show up in a movie trailer for Toy Story. It might show up as a coming attractions for something on the Disney Network or Disney Plus, or for.
Oh, you like did like a portfolio thing, like you just like made your own like package.
Yeah. I have like a lot of music that I've created. As a matter of fact, I'm working on something now in a similar vein. And there's a company called Extreme Music that I work with. And there's a few others, but Extreme Music is particular to American Pickers and a variety. I mean, almost countless television shows that are streaming. And it's a company that's was founded by Hans Zimmer and his associates. And basically, there's this great music lying around that we do on various projects. We should use it. It should be available for the media industry to work into their programming. So that's where that's where American Pickers comes from. That's kind of like real estate. It's like you prepared a piece of property, a piece of music that's licensed and used in a variety of venues. But for the Story of Jesus Christ, there was some friends of mine that they work out of Universal Studios. And they had this project for a virtual reality movie that we might develop into something else. Because I don't know, no one really knows where the virtual reality format is going. So basically, I worked on that for 3 months, and we went through a process. Again, we went through a process where they started putting in music, and I said, no, and then they said, this isn't working. Even the temp music isn't working. Let's come up with something from scratch that works only with our film. That when people hear they'll recognize it as being from our film. So, so it's a matter of just being part of the program. Being a good team player and being aware of what people are trying to communicate, and then you express that musically. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I feel like that was an awesome answer. Is there a horror that you prefer most outside of Killer Klowns from Outer Space that you've gotten to compose?
Well, I've done a variety of things. Way back when, I didn't compose the score, but I was the music director and orchestrator and conductor for a horror movie called I don't know if it's a horror movie, a ghost story. Maybe it's a horror movie. It had a lot of horror elements in it, I suppose. It was Lady in White was one. And there's numerous ones. I'm losing track of them all. But the other day, someone went through my IMDb and pulled out all the projects I've done that have a horror theme to it. And I was amazed. There's a lot of music that I've done that's been licensed out that found its way in streaming TV series that are horror themed, like Ghost Whisperer or My Haunted House, and those are kind of, I guess, reality shows. I did a video game based on paranormal activity, and there's The Cell, the sequel to The Cell. I did that. Let me see. There's one called Ring Around the Rosie. That's a psychological drama, and but I would like to do some more. I think I'm ready to hit something that hard and serious. Horror is a very, very specific. It's almost like comedy. It can be very hard. Comedy is a very difficult genre to pull off well. And genre, the same thing. I just saw Sinister. And Scott Derrickson is a director that I'm familiar with, and the composer Christopher Young, which I'm very familiar with. We went to UCLA at just back to back, so we've known each other over the years. And that Sinister is a brilliantly conceived story and script, and the score equally so. So I would love to get with a serious horror director that has a wonderful script that is really passionate about it and work on a new horror movie.
That kind of leads into the next question. perfectly. Andrew's asking, is there a specific person, group, or property, we'll say, that you would kind of be like the dream property for you to compose?
Well, I listen, if I can work with a director like Scott Derrickson or someone in that league, someone that's got has keen storytelling talents, because Scott Derrickson also wrote that script. And what's great about watching a movie with a great script is that you don't know you're watching a movie. You're in an experience. So it would be that, just to work with someone who's very, very talented. You know, there's not any like, do I want to do the next It series? No, I don't think that way. I mean, if I got the call for it, oh, absolutely. I mean, I did get last year. I was contacted to license some of my own original music directly from the wonderful people at that Netflix series that we all love called Stranger Things. You know, do I see myself doing episodes of Stranger Things? I mean, sure, if I get called, I would love to work on it, but it's not what I'm going to like work toward, you know, because it's already helmed by two really good composers that have they've got a lock on the philosophy of the movie as it relates to music. So that's done. But I get invited to work on movies. I worked on a movie with Bear McCreary. I think it was about a year and a half ago. It was called Hellfest. Basically like a Halloween Horror Nights, but with
the movie
through it, right? You know, so and it was so funny. He says, "You know what? I've been messing with this movie for several months. I keep talking about the Killer Klowns guy, and I keep telling him I know the Killer Klowns guy. I'm friends with the Killer Klowns guy. So since you're the Killer Klowns guy, do you want to, come in on this and have a blast?" And that's exactly what happened. We had an absolute blast.
A good last question. I was going to try to get some info, but Dawson seems like he's similar minded. There's rumors, there was heavy rumors of some kind of a epilogue or sequel movie to the Killer Clown story. Right. I know when Disney kind of like bought Fox, that killed some of the rumors as far as a sequel, but who knows? There's a Killer Clown in that new Disney Plus show, Prop Culture.
Right.
It's in the guy's collection. Disney didn't edit out the Killer Clown. The Killer Clown is loud and proud in the background in the show. So Disney's obviously okay kind of having the image of Killer Clowns from outer space in something. Maybe somewhere in some universe at some point we still get a Killer Clown sequel. If we ever do, I would have to imagine they propose you come back and do the music for it. Are you game to continue the Killer Clown story?
Well, brace yourself, children. Take a sip.
Don't do this.
Get ready for the ride. Here it is. Here's you're going to hear it. This is what I can tell you. This is what Uncle John can tell you. As far as the whole Disney Fox connection goes, I have no idea what that's about. I honestly, to me, that sounds. I just shrug my shoulders. I can tell you this: that the intellectual property is owned by Metro Goldwyn Mayer, MGM, and so that's all I can tell you is that they own the property. As far as any development that will happen, it will happen through them. It will happen via them, or it will be licensed from them. And we've seen that in the licensing of the intellectual property for 2 Universal Studios for Halloween Horror Nights. Right. So, I think, it would be logical that if someone was very enthusiastic about seeing a sequel, you would contact the corporate website of MGM. They have a contact number and they have an email, a .info or whatever, and I'm sure you can express it to them. I unfortunately don't have any pull unless I wanted it when I do a concert. which I have just like everyone else, just like when I did my reimagined soundtrack album, it has to go through, it has to meet their approval. So
Right.
as far as the same thing with the Kyoto Brothers, even if the Kyoto Brothers themselves want to do something that requires approval, they have to go through MGM. What's fascinating is that if I'm not mistaken, I think Universal Studios owned the property of Killer Klowns, like in the 90s, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they did there
Yeah.
for a little
And
bit.
I only know this because I did my research in the 90s because I wanted to do an alternative soundtrack way back then, and I was in contact via mail, like actually pieces of paper that you send, like, even though I lived right across the street from Universal Studios, I mailed a request to do a soundtrack. It was to Universal, so it was like in 1999. MGM ran with it with the first release of a DVD, and we did some bonus features, or what did they call them? They're called bonus features. They're called
Extra features, or
extra.
behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes stuff. So that's all I can say is that I wish I had more information for you than that. Keep your eyes open. I can't say anything about the whole 20th Century Fox Disney thing. I mean, in a fantasy world, I would say if Disney owned Killer Klowns from Outer Space, I could see California Adventure next to it someplace. There's going to be a little carnival circus. But that's in a fantasy world because that's may or may not happen because MGM is the property holder of that. So.
No, one can hope. That would be
interesting.
John, I thank you for taking time to be our guest, and I thank you guys for all watching John's panel. We will be back on the hour at 1:00 with another panel. But John, thank you, man, very much.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Kicking our day off right, man. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Give my regards to the crew. Can I give shout out to the crew? Brian, Charlie, and Andrew. Thanks, man. And